It's time for the Un-X News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Un-X News podcast, Margie Kay.
Oh, hello and welcome everybody to Un-X News. Just having a few technical difficulties here, but we'll get this straightened out. Tonight, I have two guests, and we are going long tonight. This is a 2-hour show, so I want you to stay tuned for that. I do want to mention a couple of items, though, that are important. First of all, we are having a free giveaway of a Sea Crane digital radio. This is an internet radio. You can hook up with your Wi-Fi and put it anywhere in your house and listen to it just like a radio. But now you can listen to the X this way. So all you have to do is enter, go to our website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com, and let us know how you like listening and watching to the X. That's all you have to do. You'll be entered in this drawing. And shipping is in the United States only. The other thing we've got is fairly new. We do have the conference connection right now on the Un-X Network website, and we are featuring conferences all over the world. So if you have a conference that you would like to have included, please just shoot me an email, and you can contact me at unxnetwork.com. All right, so my guest this evening, oh man, Jesse Beltran. We are going to be discussing a lot of things. One of the top things we're going to talk about is the Havana syndrome and also directed energy weapons. This is of particular interest to me because I was hit with an energy beam weapon about 5 years ago at a conference, and I saw the person do it. I knew who the person was. I knew she was an agent, a government agent that was attending UFO events, and this energy just shot at me from across the room, hit me in the chest, and I have had symptoms ever since. And it has not been a pleasant ride, although I'm starting to feel better and the symptoms are lessening, but it's been 5 years of, just problems. So we're going to talk about that this evening, among other things. Jesse Beltran is a certified master hypnotist and a leading expert, there we go, in the fields of frequencies, implant technology, and Havana syndrome. He currently serves as the president of Mind Nexus, where he spearheads transformative seminars that bridge the gap between science, space, and spirituality. With a diploma from the nationally accredited Hypnosis Motivational Institute in Tarzana, California, Jesse combines advanced training with over a decade of real-world experience to offer unique approaches to stress reduction, phobia management, PTSD treatment, and performance enhancement. Jesse was a member of the Mathematics, Engineering, and Science Association at UC Davis and holds certifications in blood and airborne pathogens from Sacramento State University. Additionally, he co-founded California's third largest internet service provider, focusing on innovative programming and pioneering high-speed data transmission via microwave technology. Today, Jesse is recognized as a visionary leader, frequently speaking at events, seminars, and retreats on topics such as the impact of frequencies on human health, the dangers of implant technology, and the realities of Havana syndrome. His career is a testament to his unwavering dedication to public service, innovation, and the power of the mind. Welcome to the program, Jesse.
Thank you, Margie. Thank you for allowing me to be on your platform.
Well, just thrilled to have you. I've been waiting a while in order to get this set up, so I'm glad you could join me tonight. You have got a lot going on. You have studied a lot of things. What sent you down this road?
Well, exactly what you described happened to you happened to someone that was very dear and close to me. And then I ended up going to a conference in Austin, Texas, and meeting with a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall, who was the author at that time of a book called, oh gosh, I just went blank. It'll come to me. He wrote two books. He wrote two books. The second book was called Guinea Pigs: Technologies of Control. And in that book, he writes about some of the efforts that I have been doing over the last couple of decades um, throughout the United States. But nonetheless, him and I got on this topic, and he was expressing to me that he was seeing individuals who were complaining of these very unusual symptoms. And he said he was seeing individuals who were saying that they were hearing some weird frequency. And then after they had this experience, it was followed by nausea, vomiting, vertigo, short-term, long-term memory loss, or what others described
Oh,
brain fog. And then they would have these strange reverberations throughout their body. And they would describe those as like electrical shocks, and sometimes getting uncontrollable twitches and body movements from it. And he just was doing something that was very sporadic. But there was an investigator out there by the name of Melinda Kidder, and she's very famous, and she was involved in the Iran-Contra scandal. And she was doing testing on individuals utilizing what was called a frequency detector, which is called a JM20 Pro. And John Hall was actually testing people to see if there were emissions or he can detect anything around their person. And oddly enough, what they were coming up positive. And so I expressed to him, and I said, well, isn't that enough for them to go to their doctors and get further examinations? He said, no, what was happening, because as soon as you mentioned that you're hearing these weird auditory symptoms, they automatically diagnose you with psychosis or sometimes some mental health disorder. And a lot
yeah.
of times we're being forced medicated and falsely put into the mental health industry.
Right.
And so I decided, and being a retired firefighter paramedic and being involved in certain studies, and we look for objectivity when we're out there in the field, whenever we're assessing a patient, trying to figure out, what should I do or what should I not do for a person. So these symptoms, unfortunately, are very subjective, and subjective meaning that you can't find any tangible to touch, feel, measure. And so I wanted to come up with a way that we could do this. And so I held a meeting in Sacramento, California, back in early 2010. And I only expected about maybe a handful of people to show up, but 100 people showed up. And I was very surprised, and every one of them all exhibited the same complaints with very, very little deviation. And so I knew we were onto something. And I said, okay, now's the time to do what Dr. Hall was doing on a mass scale, so that we can get this data, so we can, somewhat get it to be tangible, objective. And so we held a meeting in Davis, California, and then 300 people attended that. And what we were finding in our early onset of the study, we would use the JM20 Pro, and then we would do surveys so we can get statistical data as to what they were experiencing, when, how they thought this phenomenon happened, and rule out if this was due to possibly a medical condition. And so what the early data was showing us is the people that were most affected were Caucasian women who were highly educated, recently single, widowed, or divorced, followed by Caucasian males, African American females, African American males, Asians, Hispanics, and then it dwindled down in ethnicity from there. We did the same thing in the Midwest with the exact same results until we hit Chicago. In Chicago, the Caucasian criteria and African American criteria somewhat flipped, and that stayed consistent all the way up to the East Coast, up until one anomaly, which was in Virginia, where a bunch of military subcontractors asked me to come and test them because they had heard what I was doing. And they were all expressing these same complaints: an acute onset of an unusual sound, followed by vertigo, nausea, vomiting, severe headaches, short-term, long-term memory fog. It was actually affecting their speech in a lot of the cases. And more specifically, that reverberation, the electricity they could feel going through their body. And I would not be speaking to you right now if it wasn't for a phenomenon that happened in 2016 to our U.S. diplomats in Havana syndrome, in Havana, Cuba. And that was dubbed the Havana syndrome. And what they were complaining about is an acute onset of these weird sounds. They even followed by short-term, long-term memory fog, the reverberations through the body, the vertigo, the nausea, vomiting. And in May 8th of 2024, the United States Congress held a hearing at the Department of Homeland Security, and they had a witness there by the name of Colonel Greg Egrin. And Colonel Greg Egrin gave testimony that this phenomenon was real, and it's happening to the best of our best, not only our diplomats, but it's happening to the best of our best in the CIA, the FBI, and is now happening to congressional members. He says that this is now hitting our homeland and some of their family members. The bad thing about it is that when they were asked if this was happening to civilians or if they were aware of it happening to civilians, they sort of skirted the question. And what they said is that they only assess retired federal employees and or current federal employees and their family members. But I can tell you this, that since 2010, that through the inspiration of Dr. John Hall, that I formed an organization called initially the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies, along with two other gentlemen. One was Lars Regard and Peter Rosenhall in the early onset. And this is what we decided to do. And where did it take us? It took us really globally. Europe found out what I was doing, and they had government officials invite me over to test some of their diplomats and family members for possible RF emissions. And they said, can you please bring whoever you're confident that is just suffering from this? And what they allowed me to do, and I had to sign an NDA, is to use a research facility. And they had what was called an anechoic chamber. It's an environment that's made to block out huge frequency spectrums. In this case, it was 8 kilohertz to 9 kilohertz to 18 gigahertz. We knew that the frequencies that we were detecting were well within that range. And so we said, and I'm going to back up a second before I tell what our findings were. Colonel Egrin said that they believed that this was a directed energy weapon that was affecting the federal employees. So someone was literally pointing something at someone, sort of like you described. That's how this was being done. The problem with that theory is it's none to say that that does not exist, because it does. And the cases that he was talking about were happening in Florida, and they ended up catching who they believe was a group, and one of them was a Russian agent, and they found some device that would send this frequency and cause the effects that you were describing in the opening of your show. But the problem was that a lot of these federal employees said that they could not escape the signal, no matter where they were, in their cars, in their homes, going to a restaurant. It would follow them. The same thing with the victims that we were seeing, who were complaining about this phenomenon. They couldn't escape it. So we would even take people miles down into deep granite caverns, and where there was no radio signals out there, it was just way out in the boonies, and you couldn't even get a cell signal. And when we took them down to the bottom, we were still detecting the signal. So that indicated to us that this most likely was satellite based, or it's a newer technology that we're not aware of.
I just saw it. I just remote viewed it and saw it coming from satellites. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. And so This is why we went to Europe. We wanted to conclusively say, because our hypothesis was that if they can't escape it, we are detecting some signal at very specific focal areas on the human body and near the human body. And that would be the right and left TMJ, the nasal dorsum, the occipital portion of the head, the base of the neck, right and left shoulders, the apex, upper abdomen, right and left hips, and the lower lumbar areas, and occasionally, well, actually more than occasionally, frequently around the knee areas. We would get indications there. So when we took these groups to Europe, we used controls, people who weren't exhibiting any signs and symptoms of this, and we would put them in the anechoic chamber, put our equipment out, and our equipment constantly is scanning for signals. And for the first time, and I've never seen it without the wands attached to it, read 0. And so I said, we were excited about this. Okay, we've got the right environment. We know there are no frequency emissions that our equipment is picking up right now. And we know the frequency emissions that we were picking up in the preliminary scans out in the field are well within the spectrum that we needed to be. So when we brought in those who tested positive in the preliminary scans, we put them in the anechoic chamber concurrently with the control person. So we would take our equipment, test the control person in the exact same environment that the non-control person was in. The control person would read 0, but as soon as we brought the wands over to the areas where they tested positive, we would get frequency emissions. So it was at that point that we felt very strongly that this was an emission from the human body. And where are we today with that? One of my earliest clients, her name is Bonnie Kellerby, and I'm going to see if I can pull this out. And she came up positive in one of our preliminary RF scans. And lo and behold, what we ended up finding after she going through toxicology reports, MRI scans, numerous studies, they ended up finding foreign bodies on her. And here is a collection of 3 specimens that they removed from her. I'm going to have to share my screen here.
Yeah, you'll have to hit the present button.
Yeah, I
at the
see
bottom.
that. Okay, and then share screen, and let's just do entire to make it easy. Okay, and good. Boom. Okay, so this is the photomyographic report on Miss Bonnie Kellerby, and they removed a collection of 3 specimens from her body because at this point, all we know is there's some type of foreign material in her. And they indicated that these were foreign body specimens of advanced materials. And under the photomyographic study, they found that these were composed of sensors and electrical components. And this is what they look like. They're reaching nano size. These are nanowires. Our bodies don't reject them, so your biological processes will actually engulf them. And here's another one. And they come in various shapes and sizes. There's another one here, and here's another one here. And people look at them and they, well, that just looks very biological. And they're absolutely correct. But what I want to share with everyone is that here's another case back in late 2000. No, that's a different one, but since we're here, we'll talk about this. This is an MRI scan. Remember I talk about people come up positive in the TMJ area?
Oh, yes.
Right?
And me too. I've suffered with terrible TMJ problems my whole life.
Yeah, yeah. Right there is a microchip.
Uh-huh.
You can see that surrounded. Okay. So that was another case. And the case that I want to share with whoops, jumping around here a second. Close current tab. We'll get to that one. That one's really interesting. Implant images. Okay. Something's going awry here. I apologize. There it was.
That's
Th-
something strange just happened to me. My both of my ears, I heard a tone, and my hearing shut off completely for a minute and then came back. Is that something that will occur?
that is 100% what occurs.
Mm,
There's no doubt in my mind that you really need to get an RF scan. Um,
okay.
and so to continue on where we're at, is this is a cancerous tumor. This is the Bob Boyce case. You notice right there at the end of those tweezers, there's an RFID chip. Now,
Mhm.
Bob Boyce had terminal cancer, and he was in not an anechoic chamber, but he was in a Faraday cage using the same type of equipment we had, and the wand passed by his shoulder. Thought it was odd that it was pinging, so he went and got an X-ray, and they found this. And
Okay.
Bob had conceded to me he was going to die. So I asked him, I said, "Hey, Bob, when they took out the chip, where is it?" And he goes, "Well, it went to pathology and it disappeared."
Mhm.
And nonetheless, all he cared about is his cancer had gone into remission, but it came back very aggressively. He went back into the Faraday cage, re-scanned his body, found a second area location. This time they were a little smarter. They used chain of custody. They weren't going to let the chip go away. And so they pulled the second chip out of him. Okay. Really, where I want to go is to show everyone just how small these things are today. And here it is. This is a case from a politician, the Dave Larson case down in Southern California. And this was late 2009. So I want you to understand the one that Bob Boyce had, or the one that I showed you in that MRI scan in the
Ye
TMJ, that
yes.
is older technology. That you're looking, they've been doing this since the 40s through FOIA reports to our soldiers. We
Mhm.
know that this grain of rice size remained around that measure till in the 80s, until it got into the mid 80s to late 90s, that became smaller and smaller. Now, this is how small they were in 2000s. 2 letters on a penny, that's a biosensor. Okay. Here's
Uh-huh.
another type, about 4 or 5 letters on a penny. My point is that they pulled out 10 of these out of Mr. Larson, and he sued and he lost. And the reason he lost was because he inadvertently signed up to be on a study that he had no idea that he was participating in.
Oh,
And so he gave consent, and so they dismissed the case because he had given them permission.
oh
The
my.
problem is they did not give him full disclosure. And had he had full disclosure, he would never have done this. And just so I can show the audience how early this stuff started, this is a document, a federal document through a FOIA release, and it's titled Individual Rights and the Federal Role in Behavior Modification. A study prepared by the staff of the Subcommittee on Constitutional Rights of the Committee on the Judiciary, United States Senate, 93rd Congress, second session, November 1974. Now, this is this document is hundreds of pages long, but there's a highlighted areas that I want to read to everyone so they understand where I'm going with this. Okay.
Okay.
And it says, within our electrophysiological laboratory, we presently have the capability of programming the wide variety of audio-visual stimuli with current recordings of heart rate, both directly and in beats per minute, galvanic skin responses. Um, they're talking about genitalia there. I'm not sure why. Electromyographic responses and alpha and beta brainwaves. We presently are in the processes of developing portable biofeedback devices which can be used for self-monitoring in vivo. The planned use of a number of satellite facilities outside of UCLA, notably Atascadero, Camillo, and Vacaville state hospitals, raised additional questions of control and made it more difficult to monitor carefully the activities of the CSRB. Moreover, Vacaville and Atascadero were state facilities that had attracted substantial notoriety for allegedly unethical procedures over the past several years. Moreover, among the principal figures involved in the formulation of plans for the center were a number of controversial researchers in the field of behavior control technology, notably several psychosurgeons and proponents of electrophysiological methods of behavior control. One was a researcher who had conducted substantial research in methods of electronic control of human behavior, including the use of radio transmitter receivers
Oh
to
boy.
determine the location, activities, and get this, even thoughts of the individual using
Uh
the
huh.
device.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Okay. On that note, we're going to take a short break. When we come back,
Okay.
we're going to dig into that, and I've got some questions. We'll be right
Okay.
back after this.
The Un-X Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Un-X Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com.
Tickets are now on sale for Rebels of Disclosure 2025, May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois at the beautiful Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center. This will be a 4-day event with 12 speakers covering topics such as ET contact, experiencer testimonies, lost history, secret space programs, time travel, Illuminati, parallel realities, and so much more. Visit journeytotruth.online for more details.
And we're back with Un-X News, and we're speaking with Jesse Beltran this evening. Fascinating stuff, Jesse. Everything you're talking about, I can relate to personally. And as a UFO investigator for years, and doing seminars, and I've been a target, and some of these things are just hitting home with some symptoms I really didn't know about before. How prevalent is this? How many people do you think it affects?
Now, if you were to ask me back in 2010 to 2015, we were in the thousands. Now we're in the millions. Colonel Egrin testified that this is happening on every continent on this globe with the exception of Antarctica. And what I'm about to share, and like I said with everyone here, is I'm going to tie this all together so you understand just how serious this is and how important it is that we all band together. Because in my opinion, I believe this ties in the UFO abduction phenomenon, the MyLab abduction phenomenon, and the AHI, which is anomalous health incidences, is what they've now deemed Havana syndrome, is about. And this document here is another document obtained through a FOIA release. And this is called the New World Vistas report, the New World Vistas Air and Space Power for the 21st Century. It's basically our United States Air Force who released this in 1994, the best of our brightest minds, to make sure that the United States Air Force stayed a superpower 50 years in the future. And on page 89, there's a section called Biological Processes. And I'm going to read this and it'll tie in. Remember, back in the 70s, they were already able to read a person's thoughts remotely. Okay. It says, it appears likely that there are a number of physical agents that might actively but largely benignly interact and interfere with biological processes in an adversary. Prior to the mid-21st century, there will be a virtual explosion of knowledge in the field of neuroscience. Now, granted, this was in 1994, and they've been working on this for a long time. So this is usually about 10 to 20 years before that. We will have achieved a clear understanding of how the human brain works, how it really controls the various functions of the body, and how it can manipulate both positively and negatively. One can envision the development of electromagnetic energy sources, the output of which can be pulsed, shaped, and focused, that can couple with the human body in a fashion that will allow one to prevent voluntary muscular movements, control emotions, and induce sleep, transmit suggestions, interfere with both short-term and long-term memory, produce an experience set, and this is important to understand, and erase an experience set. This will open the door for development of some novel capabilities that can be used in armed conflict, in terrorist hostage situations, and in training. The voice of God weapon, how we got in the Middle East, we had all of the supposed terrorists surrender because they heard Allah tell them to give up their weapons. New weapons that offer the opportunity of control of an adversary without resorting to a lethal solution or collateral casualties that can be developed around this concept. This would offer significant improvements in the capabilities of our special operation forces. Initial experimentation should be focused on interaction of electromagnetic energy and the neuromuscular junctions involved in muscle control. Here's where it gets interesting. It would appear also possible to create high fidelity speech in the human body. A lot of these victims complain from the signal that they're hearing voices, raising the possibility of covert suggestions in psychological direction. When a high-powered microwave pulse in the gigahertz range strikes the human body, a very small temperature perturbation occurs. This is associated with sudden expansion of slightly heated tissues. This expansion is fast enough to produce an acoustic wave. If a pulse stream is used, it should be possible to create an internal acoustic field in the 5 to 15 kilohertz range, which is audible. Thus, it may be possible to talk to selected adversaries in a fashion that would be most disturbing to them. In comparison to the discussion in the paragraphs above, the concept of imprinting experience sets is highly speculative, but nonetheless highly exciting. Modern electromagnetic scattering theory raises the prospect that ultra-short pulse scattering through the human brain can result in reflected signals that can be used to construct a reliable estimated degree of central nervous system arousal. The concept behind a remote EEG is to scatter action potentials or ensembles at action potentials in major central nervous system tracts. Okay, that's a New World Vistas reports. Now, the next thing I'm going to share with you is the smoking gun. And this is a court case, and there are a lot of naysayers, because initially when I was doing podcasts, we were getting upwards of 1 million views, and then people would say that this is fake, and I wouldn't be able to respond because you had to be on the platforms for 6 months in order to put anything in. So Dawn DeVore had filed a lawsuit in California against the Department of Corrections. She was a nurse, and she became a whistleblower. They have a zero tolerance for hiding stuff that should be reported. So she was only obliging by her oath that she had took when she took that position. And in her lawsuit, this is actually Exhibit 26 in her submission. I'll read this real briefly. I don't want to go through the whole thing, but it'll bring everything together for everyone. And this is IntelliConnection, a security division of IBM. Confidential, limited distribution only, level 9 communication, 2020 neurochip implant. It says the control of crime will be a paramount concern in the 21st century. We must be ready with our security products when the demand of them becomes popular. Our research and development division has been in contact with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the California Department of Corrections, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the Massachusetts Department of Corrections to run limited trials of the 2020 neurochip implant. We have established representatives of our interests in both management and institutional levels within these departments. So they're getting their own employees hired in management positions. Federal regulations do not yet permit testing of implants on prisoners, but we have entered into contractual agreements with privatized healthcare professionals and specified correctional personnel to do limited testing of our products. We have also major successes in privately owned sanitariums with implant technology. We need, however, to expand our testing to research how effective the 2020 neurochip implant performs in those identified as the most aggressive in our society. Remember, they're doing this to protect us. In California, several prisoners were identified as members of a security threat group. They were brought to the health services at Pelican Bay and tranquilized with advanced sedatives developed by our Cambridge, Massachusetts laboratories. The implant procedure takes 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the experience of the technician. We are working on a device that will reduce the time by as much as 60%. The results of implants on 8 prisoners yielded the following results. Remember, they can read your thoughts back in the 70s. Implants served as a surveillance monitoring device from the threat group. Implants disabled 2 subjects and during an assault on a correctional staff, so they remotely tased them. Universal side effects in all 8 subjects revealed that when implants were set to 116 megahertz, so all they had to do was send that frequency, all subjects became lethargic and slept an average of 18 to 22 hours. I'm only going to read the highlights here. And it says, each subject was monitored for aggressive activity during the test period. And the findings are conclusive that out of the 8 test subjects exhibited no aggression, even when they were provoked. Each subject experienced only minor bleeding from the nose and ears 48 hours after the implant due to initial adjustment. Each subject had no knowledge, and this is important, of the implant for the test period, and each implant was retrieved under the guise of medical treatment. It should be noted that the test period was for less than 2 months. However, during that period, substantial data was gathered by our research and development team, which suggests that the implants exceeded expected results. I don't think I need to go on anymore to see how intrusive and how unethical that is.
Oh, yeah. No kidding.
Okay. Now, what would you say if I were to tell you that this is currently completely legal to do?
I'm not surprised. It's wrong, but I'm not surprised. They probably have been able to do this legally for at least 50, 60 years.
You're absolutely correct. Let's see, full consent here. I'm about to share something with the audience, and it's going to be very disturbing. So how I stumbled upon this is from the Don DeVore case. There is this thing called the Cures Act. And this is part of the section from the Don DeVore submission. It says provisions within the 21st Century Cures Act authorization authorize a non-consensual implantation of medical monitoring devices into United States citizens' bodies without their knowledge or consent. Section 3024 of the 21st Cures Act, Public Law 114-255, signed into law in December of 2016, states the clinical testing of investigational medical devices and drugs no longer requires the informed consent of subjects if the testing poses no more than minimal risk to the subjects and includes safeguards. Okay. I'm only bringing this up because this is the actual Cures Act. And I said, this can't be true. And this is signed into law by President Obama in 2016, 21st Century Cures Act. And we're going to go down to section 3024. And it says exactly that. Clinical testing of investigational medical devices and drugs no longer requires the informed consent of the subjects if the testing poses no more than minimal risk to the subjects. Okay, that's fine. Who decides what minimal risk is?
That was my question. Okay. What is minimal risk?
That was my question. So guess what? Any data that is collected by any agency under the Cures Act is protected by national security protocols. So therefore, there is no oversight as to who establishes what minimal risk is. And so I started to dig in a lot deeper about this minimal risk and what that really meant. And I apologize. And gosh, I lost my spot. Okay. So here's what I found out. before the 21st Century Cures Act passed in 2016, bypassing or altering informed consent in human subjects, the research was legal only under specific conditions governed by pre-existing regulations. Okay. The thing is, you're absolutely right. This has been legal since the 70s, late 70s, and under the rule of law. And this is why we're out here fighting about this. And it turns out that most countries in North America or our allies have laws that allow them to experiment on you without your consent. And there is no oversight whatsoever because it's all protected by national security protocols. Here's another implant, a biosensor that was removed from a person. This was done in Australia. And when they looked at it closely, guess what it was stamped with? The letters NASA.
Oh, not surprising.
Okay. And this is the report on that specimen. And I'm just going to take it down. This is exactly what they found stamped on it. Okay. Let's see, where else can I go? Good. I want to make sure I'm conscientious of the time we have here.
Yeah, we can stretch it to 20 minutes, about 19 minutes.
Okay, let's see what should be important.
But there is one question in the chat. She wants to know if any of the patients you know of have an IgA immunoglobulin A deficiency in their blood.
That's something that we would have to look in the toxicology report. I'm on the technical side. In a lot of our cases, we coach people on what to do to achieve what my clients have done to be successful in getting implants removed. So that would be something that we would have to ask of one of our doctors. But I wanted to talk about the history of human experimentation in the United States. We're notorious for doing this. These are just a few of the historical overviews of what has happened. The experimentation occurred globally across different time periods. Notably, it was, because of World War II, during Nazi Germany and Japan's Unit 731 experiments. During the Cold War era, the US, the UK, Canada, and the USSR conducted mind control, biological, and chemical experiments on citizens and soldiers. Post-war, many programs came to light through declassified documents decades later. And the legal and ethical structures that enabled it were governments used national security exemptions and classified budgets to shield experiments. The US state secrets doctrine was used to dismiss lawsuits, and they actually tried to use the Cures Act to get the judge to dismiss the Don DeVore case. Ultimately, in the Don DeVore case, she ended up settling out of court for, I believe, around $5 million. She was suing for hundreds of millions. And then the Nuremberg Code came in 1947, Declaration of Helsinki in 1964, and then the Belmont Report in 1979. But in 1979 is where they started to really take advantage of this non-consensual experimentation. And the common patterns based on our research, government involvement, military oversight, or intelligence agencies gave direction. Use of marginalized, institutionalized, or uninformed populations. Unfortunately, it's those who are most vulnerable in our society: the homeless, the incarcerated, and the institutionalized. And here's what I'd throw out to you. Based on what we know today, and the fact that we know that they can manipulate people, particularly if you're highly suggestible. 30% of our population is naturally highly suggestible. And I know this as a master hypnotherapist, that this is the case. So even without the technology, you can get people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. But if you do this, which is very covertly, remember, they're hearing sounds. And a lot of them, their lives are destroyed. I know of 27 victims who have been subject to this, who have committed suicide. So I put this out there. I would challenge any institution on this phenomenon that minimal risk has been far exceeded. But the problem is they define what minimal risk that wouldn't happen to someone in their normal everyday lives. And so how far are these monsters really taking it? People die every day. Is that why they think it's okay to do? And that's okay when people commit suicide, or is it okay when you falsely incarcerate someone or you force someone into a mental institution, even though they're completely sane, only because they're speaking up against something that you don't agree with? You know, these are the issues. Pandora's box has been opened, and these are the issues that we have to deal with today. The impacts on victims: many suffered lifelong injuries, trauma, and death. Most victims never received justice or compensation. Families often found out years or decades later. Under this experimentation, they do have to inform you at some point. But if you look at what they're doing, you look at the behavior over and over again, 50 to 80 years later, they go and they tell you what they've done to you. And by then, most people can't even file a lawsuit, or they've already since passed.
So they actually do have to inform you at some point of their choosing.
Yes, correct.
Oh
But
my
there's no
goodness.
oversight. So how do you know they're
Well, what
even
if the
informing
person-
when they're supposed to?
Yeah, and what if the person dies before you can tell them?
Correct.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know, modern day, what we're dealing with today, with the advent of AI and surveillance tools, they're being tested without consent in schools and public spaces. All your biometric data, your genetic data harvesting through commercial products, and then the bio enhancements and neural interface testing for our military that they're doing. A lot of our military are coming up positive. And in fact, I have a case right now, and we couldn't understand. He was coming up with a frequency that we never found before, and the frequency wasn't even owned by the United States. And he was Special Forces. It was owned by NATO. Okay.
Oh.
Yep. And many programs initially considered conspiracy theories have now since been confirmed through official channels. Examples would include MK Ultra, the Tuskegee experiments, the Guatemala STD experiments, and this has all been known through declassified documents and congressional hearings. But, you know, in conclusion of my report, the history of covert human experimentation really reveals the dangers of unchecked power and secrecy and the exploitation of vulnerable groups. And so we need to have awareness, legal protections, and transparency, and that is our fight. So this is not a conspiracy theory. This is real. We're pulling out implants out of people, and I'm, you know, on a mission, a journey, along with my colleagues with Cosmic Clarity Connection and every organization that is out there helping us. This is why we're sounding the alarms. And I'm going to close it with the 2016 Cures Act. It gets worse. In 2024, well, 2016, it was Obama. In 2024, President Biden codified the Cures Act to include private entities with the same protections.
No.
Yes.
And no one knows about this.
It's there if you look for it, but it
Right.
specifically says, yes, yeah. And it says effective January 22nd, 2024, the FDA's final ruling, waivers allowed for minimal risk FDA studies, including private entities when you look at the law. So this is why I do what we're doing. This is why we're out there very aggressively. And we want to make sure that everyone is aware that this is a fight for the human species, the human experience, if you want to be human anymore. With the advent of nanotech, we are in a paradigm shift where our laws are not keeping up with technology. There's a huge discrepancy. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bachelet. In 2013, he gave a talk in Israel, and he holds up a syringe for diabetes that they would use in a 1cc syringe. And he's inventor of these nanobots. And he explains to the group, the audience, that in this, what I hold is 1,000 billion robots.
Oh, my God.
1,000 billion. And I'm going to show everyone what those 1,000 billion robots look like.
The-
Is my screen
That's
still sharing? It is.
nanotechnology.
Yes.
You can
Is
only
my
see
screen
them
still
through
sharing?
a microscope, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see my screen. Okay. So here, this is Dr. Bachelet. Let me see. I have a better picture of him. And he's holding it up. And he's very proud of his invention. By the way, he also says they're controlled with radio frequency, and you can use a joystick. So any game set to control these. And he demonstrates how his students are using joysticks to control these nanobots. Okay.
Wow.
Let's see. So this is what they are. This is when they're completely sealed. Then you send them with radio frequency wherever you want throughout the body. And then you can open them up with a radio frequency and they'll release whatever payloads inside them. Now remember, he said 1,000 billion of these in the tip of that. Okay. Now, recently, there's a gentleman by the name of Len Bear who's been putting out some information on Substack. Yeah, I didn't want to close that. It was too early. And he shows what they're finding in the lidocaine derivative. This is xylocaine. This is what you get when you go to the dentist.
Yes.
And I sometimes wonder why, a lot of times we're getting people positive in the TMJ areas. But look at these. They look familiar.
Oh, yeah.
If they don't, I'll show you a slide where they might. So this is Dr. Bachelet's robots. These are the robots in the lidocaine derivative.
Yeah.
So right now it's legal to non-consensually experiment on American citizens. And so I'm now initiating a call to action to bring everyone to the forefront. I tried to stop sharing. There we go. Okay. To the forefront. Next month, I'm going to be speaking at a peace summit, not next week, actually. And we are going to start a campaign, a petition, because I think every American, if they were aware that they could be experimented on unchecked without oversight, that is a wake-up call. And so our goal is to, and it's very, a very aggressive goal is to obtain 1 million signatures. And I don't know about you, but there are studies right now, and most of academia is saying with this nanotechnology that you can change a species in 6 generations. There's a very prominent doctor out there, Dr. Hildegard Staninger, who's a phenom with this nanotech and has been touting her horn for decades that this was coming. And she says you can do this in 1 generation. And so then what happens to human rights if you're no longer human? So this is the thing we need to think about. It's not about us anymore. This, what's been done is done. I'm not sure if we can come up with a solution quick enough, but it's about your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. And this is what our fight needs to be about.
Well, I know everybody who watches my show will be 100% behind this. I think you'll get 1 million signatures. I really do.
I hope
There are
so.
so many people that have been affected, but as soon as you get that knowledge out there, get this information out like you have this evening, and you've got the proof right there. This is incredible. I don't have time to tell you another thing that happened to me. So I'm just going to ask the question, can they put the same thoughts in several people's heads at the same time and make them act as a group to do something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was afraid of that.
It's group hypnosis. It's no different.
Yeah.
I can take a group and I can hypnotize everyone in the audience. You just got to know their suggestibility, the type of suggestibility you have, whether it's emotional suggestible or physical suggestible. You have to come at it in different ways, but you can definitely do that.
Well, when you hear your own voice in your head and you think it's your own thoughts, but it's something so bizarre and irregular, it's something that you wouldn't do. And then you find out, and this happened to me, several other investigators heard the exact same words in their heads at the same time, but in their own voices. And it was a very bad thing. Let's just leave it at that. So we've got to stop this.
Yes, I work with a lot of individuals, and the number one thing is if we've come up with a lot of techniques. We're doing the RF scanning. By the way, we are doing clinics. If you think that this might be happening in your area and you have a group of at least 10, and you want to sponsor us to come out there, we'll definitely come out there and do that for you. We'll be in Los Angeles next month on the weekend of the 17th doing testing there. And then the following month, we're going to be in New York. But this is something that we do. Also, we do retreats for people. They're really life-changing, really to get a new perspective on life. And we share what reality really is, and then give you some tools to work with. And it is life-changing. I can raise my hand. Unexpectedly, it changed my life. But this is what we're doing. But the main thing now is right now we need to wake up. I think right now the timing is right. We've got an administration that, at least from the outward appearance, appears to be receptive. And if we came in with 1 million signatures, I think we can really get some good work done.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jesse. Jesse Beltran, this has been amazing. I've got to have you come back because we've got a lot more to talk about. But this is just wonderful information. Keep in touch with me. I will. Where are you located?
We're located in Reno, Nevada, and
okay.
But at our website though is nexuslive.com. Definitely look at us there. And also Dr. Hall's book, it just came back. As a new breed satellite terrorism in America. It's a really good starting foundation for you to really understand what an individual goes through. These people are being tortured, their lives destroyed, and it needs to stop.
Yeah. I was so glad to meet you. It's wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much, Jesse.
Wonderful. Thank you again for your platform.
All right. Thank you so much. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to bring on Tyler Kiwala and talk about some more deep, dark stuff.
Un-X Network has you covered. Listen to the X live stream for the Conference Connection, or check out the Conference Connection page on the Un-X Network website. There, you will find complete details on all of the biggest events of the year, as well as some new and newer ones. The X is a proud sponsor, and we appear at many of these amazing events, so stop by and see us. Listen to the unxnetwork.com 24-hour live stream for your chance to win free conference tickets and giveaways all year long. The Un-X Network is your conference connection for the best conferences, expos, and symposiums for 2025 worldwide. So for more information, log on to unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Un-X Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com. Don't miss the supernatural event of 2025, the biggest, best, and original ghost conference in America returns June the 26th through the 29th in Alton, Illinois. The Haunted America Conference returns to one of the most haunted small towns in all of America for our 28th annual event. Join us for new and returning speakers on ghosts, hauntings, the paranormal, and the unexplained. Plus, how-to workshops, question and answer sessions, special events, haunted tours, and much more. The Haunted America Conference is always the most fun you'll have at a paranormal event. We look forward to seeing you in June 2025. You won't be sorry that you've come to help us celebrate 28 years. Visit ghostconference.net to register today. That's ghostconference.net.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Margie Kay, and this is Un-X News. And this is a long haul on Friday night. We're doing a 2-hour show this evening. My next guest is a good friend of mine, Tyler Kiwala. He's an ET experiencer, independent researcher, and passionate disclosure activist, most popularly known in the awakening community for Journey to Truth podcast, hosted by himself and fellow disclosure activist Aaron Kuhn. Together, they have created a platform for discussing any and all controversial and eye-opening topics without limitations in an effort to spread awareness to the masses. Tyler's journey began with a levitation experience shortly after his mother's passing in 2010 that ended with intense paralysis and visitation from shadow people. This would lead to experiences with inner earth beings, Sasquatch greys, reptilians, and recruitment attempts into covert military programs. Welcome to the program, Tyler.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming back again. You've got a new book out, and you've got a lot of things going on. You've got a new Journey to Truth conference coming up, which we will get to. We will talk about that. You spoke about in your bio, you talk about the event that occurred when your mother passed. Can you go into a little more detail on that?
Yeah, and I do want to say before we start that Jesse, for one, if you ever needed evidence, I mean, there it is. That's impressive and very validating, because a lot of what I talk about in my book is the targeting and the implants and the voice of God technology that I experienced. So like we can kind of piggyback off of that if you'd like, but I can talk about the levitation experience. Yes. So my mother passed away in 2011. That was my own typo in the my bio. It's 2011, and shortly after, almost immediately after, I experienced my first episode of sleep paralysis, which wasn't sleep paralysis, in my opinion, isn't just some rare condition that some people get. In my case, it was very much of a entity attack, something sitting on your chest. We've all seen the depiction. There's like a presence on top of you. And I was laying in bed. My mom passed away a few days later. I was laying in bed, watching TV, and my TV remote that was laying to my right started levitating. It started just like floating out of my bed. And it doesn't register right off the bat. And you think you're dreaming, and then I started watching it, and I went to grab it, and I started coming out of bed. And the next thing I know, I am on my way to the ceiling. I'm floating. And I thought, surely, like, I remember thinking I was having an out-of-body experience because I had heard of that. And I didn't know that I was actually levitating until I was getting close to the ceiling, and I managed to somehow turn myself around, and I caught myself in the mirrored closet doors, and I saw myself in the air with the TV remote floating next to me. And that's when it got real. I started panicking. I literally started like doggy paddling, trying to swim back down into bed. And it was working until something took over my body and kind of crossed my arms and legs and slammed me down. And I was paralyzed, but I wasn't just paralyzed. I could feel this weight of something on top of me. And I thought I was going to die. I thought surely somebody was going to walk in and find me dead the next day. This was the thoughts that were going through my head. I finally gave myself a little pep talk and broke out of it and ran down the hall. And I was like, holy shit, what was that? So that story is told in great detail in my book, but that was what started everything for me. And that's what, kickstarted my whole awakening. And that was the beginning, unfortunately, of years of sleep paralysis until I figured out a way to overcome it.
I experienced sleep paralysis as well for quite some time. And then I realized that if I quit fighting it and relaxed, that it would stop. Is that your method as well?
No, I just break free. I fight it and break free. I figured out a way to do it. And maybe it's different I do think it's unique to the individual and it's different for everybody. And depending on who we are and like how severe it is and what's actually happening, we all have our own ways to break free from it or overcome it. Just like we all have a certain diet that works for us or whatever the case may be. It's just specific and unique to the individual, I think.
Yeah. I think what people need to know though is it's not going to last forever. It will eventually stop. That paralysis. But I agree with you. I don't think that this is a common thing. I don't think it's just something, that psychologists say is a normal thing and it's nothing to worry about. It seems to me that people who are experiencers of unexplained phenomena have this happen quite often. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's more common than I thought. When it was happening to me, I didn't know where to look. I started looking for like YouTube videos and documentaries, and I found some good stuff, but it never explained who was behind it or why it was happening. It was just explaining the phenomenon, but there was no real answers. Mystifying marks at how high did I levitate? I almost hit the ceiling. So in the typical bedroom ceiling, 8 feet or whatever. And Mark was asking earlier in the chat, there's pictures in my book. Yes, there's corresponding pictures to a lot of the experiences. I didn't overload it with pictures because I like the reader to also use their imagination and create, the vision in their head. So I forgot where I was going. Yeah, there it is right there. What's funny is 5 minutes ago, literally 10 minutes ago now, it just came. I finally got my official copy in the mail. It's right here.
Oh, wow. It is hot off the press. That is for sure. Now, look how thick that thing is. How many pages do you have?
389 pages. Or something like God.
That's a big book.
Yeah.
That's huge.
No, I lied. 69 pages. I had it backwards. 369. 369. Hey, Tesla. I didn't even try to do that.
Oh, there you go. And now tell me that wasn't planned, Tyler.
Right. It wasn't actually.
Really? That was
funny.
A coincidence?
That's literally the last numbered page in the book. Wow.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tesla.
So I don't remember where I was going with that, but you can ask a question if you'd like.
Have you found any implants in yourself?
Actually, yeah. So this is something that's in my book. I actually reached out to you and asked for permission to use a screenshot from one of our text conversations because I had this experience, which was like a memory recall type of bleed through. I have an entire chapter about it in the book, but it ended with me being implanted right here with an implant, injected like a syringe, injected an implant. And it felt so real that I woke up in pain actually. And I kept trying to feel if I could, feel a lump in there. And all day long, I was like rubbing my collarbone, my neck. And I, until I decided to write it down and write down the whole experience, what happened. And then I don't know, maybe it was a couple weeks later, a month later, I finally decided to reach out to you and ask you. I didn't tell you anything. And I put the raw conversation in the book. I said, can you remote view, scan for implants remotely? That's what I asked you. And you said, sure. And you said, I see one in your left side of your neck. And I was like, you can't make it up. You just can't make that up. And that's exactly where it was. And you saw it. So that was all the proof I needed. And I know exactly what it was for based on my experience. But it was, Jesse providing all of that information was really interesting, because his was talking about more of the 3-letter agencies and the military, them doing it, and NSA, but mine came from the Federation, I would call them.
Those guys.
Yeah.
There's so much going on. People could have multiple implants from different sources, and it seems that now I knew Dr. Roger Lear, and in fact he wrote the longest, most detailed article on implants, and I published it in Un-X magazine. 10 days later he was dead.
Wow.
I think there was possibly a connection because he died under mysterious circumstances, but he was getting ready to remove implants from 3 witnesses that I worked with. Right. And but since then, I have found that people have had them removed, or they actually came up to the surface and they were taken out. They took them out themselves. It would have been something that's like peeking out of your skin, and they pulled it out. Then they get visited again, they get abducted again, and there's more implants in their body when that happens. Right. What do you know about that?
I've heard that. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if that's a blanket theory. I don't think that might not be the same for everybody, but I think the large majority of cases that would be likely that would be the case, that if it was removed, it would be replaced. In my case, the one that's in my collarbone, my neck, wherever right here, it's actually doing something good, and I know people will have a problem with that until they read the book. And I could explain what it's doing, but it would require me to get into some information that could potentially get you this episode deleted off of YouTube. So
okay, then we won't go there.
We won't go there, but the chapter in the book is called "Plucked from Existence." I don't know which chapter number it is, but that's the chapter if anybody wants to read it. But it's definitely, actually you come up in my book a few times because I tell the story in great detail. Also what happened this previous year at the conference in Springfield when I went to the hospital and had the abduction experience at the hospital. So
that was so awful.
Yeah, it was, but I learned a lot from it, and it was actually quite an incredible story that really opened my eyes to what's going on and how what I call cross timeline interference can happen. And it's kind of confusing. I break it down the best I can in the book. That's why I call it Bleedthrough, because I think we're living, multiple lives simultaneously. And I think some of these random memories we get are actually bleeding through from other timelines. They might not necessarily be from this life. They could be. You could have been abducted and then worked 20 years in a space program and brought back at the same time you were taken. That could have happened. But also I think there could be a simultaneous life where you're just living like a parallel universe or, parallel Earth or something, another version of you that's doing something different. And when something significant happens to that version of you, I think that memory might potentially bleed through into this reality, and you will get is that music playing?
What? I don't know where that's coming from. We don't have anything else coming in. What in the world? Okay. Interference, guys, but they didn't take us off the air.
That was bleed through from another timeline.
Bleed through, right.
Right.
Let's go back to the Springfield conference for a minute, XCon last year.
Yeah.
We knew the place was haunted. And we knew the previous year we'd had a Mothman experience. Lots of people saw that. Lots of people saw shadows everywhere. And we thought nothing real bad happened. We thought, well, this would be cool to really investigate and do a lot of paranormal work. And so we had 2 teams of investigators after hours. So we're doing all our talks and everything. And then in the evening, doing an investigation of the site. And things got very weird. There were things happening everywhere. At first, it was totally silent. We thought nothing was going to be happening all night, right? And then we had a lot of activity at the same time. And I think before a lot of that happened late, I think you went on to bed.
Yeah,
and
it was right after I left, it all happened. So I was like the bad luck in that case, apparently.
Well, I'm not real sure I'm not sure what triggered it, but by the end of the evening, we were convinced that that entire building is a portal.
I believe
and
that.
it's because we saw apparitions, we heard things coming through, we heard disembodied voices, we got them on, we got EVPs, we got things on video. Some people were actually attacked and choked, and it was serious. It was a very dark energy that was going on, and unbeknownst to us, this crazy stuff was happening to you in your room. And I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, for the audience right now.
Yeah, I can. It was very traumatic, actually. It was a bigger deal than I think most people realize. But the first night I was there, I couldn't sleep at all. Like literally, I didn't fall asleep. And I, even at one point, something grabbed my ankle. I'm pretty sure of it. And, while I'm laying in bed. And I think you told me like a day or two later that someone else had the same thing happen to them. And I was like, that happened to me too. Yeah. So
it actually, two women, one of them was actually pulled while she was walking, and she fell on the ground.
Wow.
Grabbing her ankle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I would, no doubt that's a haunted hotel, but so I'll just say this. I ingested something that I thought it was an allergic reaction, but it turns out my body responded to it as a poison. It wasn't, the doctor said it didn't look like I had an allergic reaction, but it acted as a poison. Like whatever ingredient was in this thing basically almost killed me. And my throat swelled shut, and had a miraculous series of events not happen exactly the way they did. I wouldn't be here today, but my father happened to be in the hotel room with me when he wasn't supposed to be. He switched rooms that day to be with me. His friend just happened to leave her EpiPen in his truck, and the EpiPen is what saved me, and along with a number of other things. But my throat was closing up. I stopped breathing, and I started going into anaphylactic shock, and had to use the EpiPen, and the ambulance took me. And when I was on the way to the hospital, I experienced what I would call a military abduction, and from the ambulance. And that story is, I tell that in great detail in my book. But what I find the most interesting is that when I came back the next day, I was just telling you what happened. I wasn't really planning on like going into all the details. And you said, "Were you taken?" I didn't even tell you anything. Were you taken? I said, "Yeah, I think I was actually. That's like, I think I was abducted." And she goes, "Okay." You're like, don't say anymore. Give me your hand." And you held my hand, and you started remote viewing, and you saw that, she's like, "Yeah, I think I remember the first thing that you said was, not a normal hospital, not a normal hospital." And that's what my dad and I thought the whole time. Like the whole hospital situation was completely weird. Nothing was the way it was supposed to be. They ended up bringing me to the psych ward where they put the homicidal patients. I ended up in a room with glass windows and a camera in it. And at one point I woke up in the basement of the hospital. And I found out from a Mercy employee that worked at the hospital that there are tunnels, and they do, in fact, transport the psych patients in the underground tunnels of the hospital. So I wasn't imagining things when I woke up for a minute and saw that I was in the basement. And there was a number of odd things that happened, but you confirmed it all when you were like, that wasn't a normal hospital. You said, I don't know if you were taken to a ship or if you were in another dimension, but something about that hospital wasn't what you thought it was. And that rang true to me. And then you can't make this up. Linda Eastburn, who was a speaker at your conference, I bought her book later that day, the next day. And her friend or whatever walked over and gave it to me while I was sitting at the table. I bought the book and she brought it over to me. And it would just happen to be bookmarked on a page that was titled Screen Memories. and it literally talked about how extraterrestrials can, project a screen memory of a location, and you might think that you're one place when you're actually not. And I'm like, there's no coincidence at this point. You tell me that, and then she brings us over, and it verified everything my dad and I, all of our suspicions. And there was a lot more that happened at that hospital, a lot more actually, and it just was not a normal situation. They never asked for my information. I could have just made up anything. I could have just told them anything. They never even asked for my information. So, yeah, I don't know how much you want me to get into. I can go into more details, but it's a long story. We could be here all night just on that one story. But
well, I think the thing that cemented me, of course, you had some strange things happening in the hospital and at the hotel that are totally unexplainable. But the main thing that cemented it for me was when you were checking out, they did not ask for your insurance. They didn't ask for your ID. And, and those are always required when you go into a hospital. They're just like,
Right.
releasing you. And I think that was the moment for me when I said, oh yeah, this is a military operation is what I really felt. And at least they made it appear that way.
I saw Army. I literally saw Army. I mean, so what happened was when I got in the ambulance, the first thing they did was they gave me an IV, and they gave me Benadryl first, and then they gave me sodium pentothal, and I had the guy repeat himself. I said, wow. What do you give me? He said sodium pentothal. And I know the reason I asked him, because from interviewing people, I know that that's used as a truth serum. Because when they're to get you to talk. And I said, why are you giving me that? And he looked at me and he said, so you don't freak out. And I didn't know what he meant by that. And when he looked at me, I swear to God, he wasn't a human. His eyes looked like they had cameras behind him. He was like synthetic. And then I was watching him, and he was like, he had these very robotic movements, and he was asking me questions. He's like, why are you at the Oasis Hotel? I'm like, I'm speaking at a conference, a paranormal conference. He's like, what's your presentation about? I said the secret space program. And I said the history of the secret space program. And he goes, right, the secret space program. Like, he didn't believe me. But then I looked over at the other girl, and she was moving normally. And I looked back at him, and this guy seemed, I couldn't, you know how you could look into someone's eyes and you could like see their soul, like see past it. I couldn't see past it. This guy was stone cold. Whenever he gave me the sodium pentothal, I blacked out. And that's the next memory I have was waking up in the basement. And I looked around, and I'm like, why am I in the basement? And I passed back out, right? And then next thing I know, I come to in the wheelchair, and I'm in the emergency room. I have no memory how I got to the emergency room. And then I saw my dad there, and I was so confused. I was like, Dad, I said, was I in the basement? And he said, no. What are you talking about? I said, are you sure? And I said, I need you to tell me. I was starting to freak out. I said, I need you to tell me exactly everything that happened right now. And he's like, what do you mean? What don't you remember? I said, just tell me everything step by step what happened. And he's like, well, they want to ask you some questions first. And so they started basically kind of, that's what happened. So they put this oxygen sensor on my finger in the ER, and it triggered this memory of when I was in the basement. I literally had this memory. I don't know where it came from, but I was in the basement of the hospital in my wheelchair at this like metal table, and I was being interrogated on a polygraph. And the reason that I remembered it, because that oxygen sensor on my finger triggered the memory, because they clip something on your finger for the polygraph.
Yes.
And that's what triggered the memory. And I remember seeing men in suits and an armed guard by the door, like an army man, whatever. And the memory was like coming back as they were asking me questions in the ER. And I'm like freaking, it was overwhelming, because I'm like panicking about like, I'm so confused on where this memory is coming from and how I got there. And they're trying to ask me questions about, they're like telling me step by step what happened from the moment that you were from the moment you ingested the gummy all the way until the point when you got to the ambulance or whatever. They just wanted me to tell them the whole story, and they didn't believe me. And they were acting like they didn't believe me. And my dad started getting frustrated, and he was like, no, he was like, I literally watched my son stop breathing. He's not making this up. And like, didn't make any sense why they wouldn't even believe me in the first place. And the whole thing, I mean, this story gets wilder and wilder. I mean, you wouldn't even believe what happens after that. But it was definitely I called the chapter in the book "A Dance with Death."
Yeah, well, that's a good name for it. You were the next morning just white as a ghost.
Yeah,
I knew something had happened because, and also the thing about this, as I'm remote viewing it again, there was an agenda, but because you took the gummy and you had that reaction, it jacked up their agenda. And so then, and I just get this feeling that they're questioning you because they simply couldn't believe that anybody could do something to stop what their plans were.
I'm kind of getting chills right now because I know why they were interrogating me. And it just gets into a whole other like secret space program thing. But that prior to the conference, I started having these memories come back from being on this military base. And I found out through a friend of mine after I was telling him the memory in like great detail. He's like, "It sounds like you're describing Fort Leonard Wood." I'm like, "Why do you say that?" He goes, "Well, I deliver there. And it just, what you're describing sounds like Fort Leonard Wood." And I'm like, "I didn't even know about Fort Leonard Wood. I didn't know it was 2 hours away from my house." And then right after that, my grandfather passes away. I go to his celebration of life, and I found out that he was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood while he was in the National Guard.
Yeah.
And there's a connection. And then I find this again, another synchronicity pops up. Interview TikTok comes up on my phone of James Casbolt, this military whistleblower, talking about he was an MI6 agent that was brought to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for special forces training. And I'm like, why does Fort Leonard Wood keep coming up? I drive to the conference, not even connecting the dots. I literally see the signs on the highway for Fort Leonard Wood. I pass it up. I'm like, no shit. I'm driving right past it. I get to the conference, and there's a whole long story with this, but all these Army synchronicities keep happening, right? And when we were on that ghost hunt, one of the girls there, I don't even remember her name, she was like, "Can I tell you what I'm seeing? Not to freak you out." She's like, "There's a dark figure following me around, and I just keep hearing in my head, U.S. Army, U.S. Army." And I was like, I think I know what she meant. Because at this point, all these Army synchronicities were just stacking up, all the way down to a book that I got from Race, from that table. It was a book that was discarded from the U.S. Army Library called Interstellar, and it talked about all these timelines and parallel universes and all this stuff. And so then literally when I woke up and when I had the memory of being interrogated, I saw the Army guy. But what was even more interesting, when they brought me to that floor in the hospital, for one, there was like police force posted in the area, right? And I found that interesting. I'm like, this isn't normal. But when I was in one of the waiting rooms, this guy walked past the waiting room when he was wearing a U.S. Army hat, and he looked right at me and he smiled. And then he just turned his head and walked away. So there's this Army connection. I almost wonder if they were interrogating me to see what I remembered from that life or that time in Fort Leonard Wood. Whatever happened there, like wherever that memory came from, I feel like they were seeing how much I remembered from it. But apparently they couldn't get much out of me because I was so out of it from the drugs.
Well, and Fort Leonard Wood is not very far from Springfield.
No.
So an ambulance could have taken you there, could easily have taken you to a hospital on the base.
Yeah, I mean, it was it's an hour. I think it's an hour from there. But I mean, I don't know. There's all kinds of loopholes in that story that just didn't add up,
Yeah.
And
well, they probably have means of transportation that would make it faster too.
Right. And there's a lot more
yeah.
to it. And I encourage anyone to read the book if they want the whole story, because it's very fascinating.
Let me bring that back up here. I want everybody to see this cover's fantastic. Who designed the cover?
I did.
Yeah. Good job.
Yeah.
I like it. So you talk about some other things in the book too. What are some of the titles that some of the other subjects that you've got?
Right. So, I mean, I go through astral interference, my lucid dreaming, and like all the stuff in the early days of my awakening. I learned everything about the astral realm and all the possibilities and everything that can happen negatively and positively. and I break down the whole lucid dreaming aspect of my awakening and the astral interference. And then I get into a Mars recruitment attempt that happened in 2017, where I was quite literally, I had a guy I used to work with. He was escorted off a job by black government vehicles. He disappeared for a month. I ran into him by chance at the park one day, and I pulled up and I looked over. I'm like, Larry, what happened to you? Because nobody knew what happened to him. He just, got pulled off the job. And he's like, you showed up. And I said, what do you mean I showed up? He goes, you don't think you're here by accident, do you? And I said, what do you mean? And then we got out of the car, and he was like, he said, don't, we got to watch what we say, because that guy over there, he's been following me all morning. He's listening to us. He's got an earpiece. I'm like, what are you talking about? What happened to you? And he started telling me the story, and it was wild. And he told me that he was literally being recruited to go to Mars. And I was like, what are you? And after talking to him for months that summer, the whole thing was an attempt to convince me to go with him. And he was adamant about it. He would show up at my house every time we were around. Every time he was around, these black government vehicles would drive through my neighborhood. My dog would bark at him. Helicopters. Oh. I was being targeted. He told me about. He was the one who told me that there were multiple timelines, and he told me about underground, like the domes and the military bases, and how they can control the weather and all this stuff. And he told me that the government has a time travel program, and he was in contact with this woman that was part of this, that she was a time traveler, and she claimed that she was from the past, present, and future. And she was disguised here as a homeless person, and she was living under the St. Francis Bridge. Well, in St. Francis, Missouri, there's a deep underground military base. So he told me that it was just all this stuff, this crazy stuff. And he was constantly trying to get me to come to Mars. And that's in the book. And I mean, there's so much more. And another second recruitment attempt that happened in 2022. A guy tried to bring me into another program, and that was really interesting. That resulted in some extreme targeting, like what Jesse Beltran was talking about, like the voice of God stuff, and just straight up like gang stalking and targeting. People were breaking into my cars, into my house, taking my dog's collars, but they weren't taking anything. They just want you to think that you're going crazy. And so I mean, it's all in the book.
Did you ever have any, and I say this because this has happened to me in the past, but in the past couple of weeks, it's been really, really bad. You hear people walking around your house and floors creaking, everything. You get up and look around, there's nothing there. Yeah. Does that happen to you?
Yeah, absolutely. In one case, it was so real, I couldn't believe somebody wasn't in my house. And I had someone with me that heard person also, and nobody was there. We heard somebody upstairs, even heard somebody talking, sound like one side of a phone call. And I ran up the stairs. I had this big Rambo knife. I literally ran up the stairs, like whoever was in my house, whatever I was going to do, I don't know. But I didn't want them in my house. Nobody was there. I was blown away. I'm like, we both literally just listened to this person walking around, and we could hear him talking, and I ran upstairs and nobody was there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, and it seems that as time goes on, the noises get louder, and then you hear the voices. Whereas in the beginning, it's light, and you're not really sure what you heard. But at this point right now is what's going on in my house and in my office. I actually heard a person with a male voice say one word this afternoon, and I was here completely alone. There's no way. I even looked around because I thought a person had come back in, but they didn't.
Right.
Why do you think they do that? Do they do that to freak you out, or, make it so you can't get any sleep?
From interviewing targeted individuals and doing my own research, for one, sleep deprivation is like one of the worst forms of torture. And when they deprive you of sleep, you're literally just functioning in a lower frequency to where their weaponry is more effective on you. So if they did want to manipulate you with a voice of God technology or whatever it is, if you're sleep deprived, it works much better. And on top of that, if you're taking like pharmaceuticals or alcohol, whatever, anything, like if there's a number of things that make that technology more more effective, and than if you were sober and healthy and well rested, right? But from my understanding, like when they were like breaking into my car and not taking anything, and this would happen over and over, when my dog's collars were missing and stuff was being moved in my home, my mailbox lid would be open every day. I'm like, what? That's just silly things, but they want you to think that you're going crazy. They want you to think that you're going crazy. Then you start hearing voices in your head. And then I got hit with I was at a park, Jefferson Barracks Park. It's right near that old military base. And this is when all the targeting was really started. And I was just walking a trail, and all of a sudden my left leg started burning. Like my left thigh started burning so bad. I was like, what the, and I'm like scratching it, and it's itching, and it's like really itching. And I looked down, and my whole left leg broke out in hives. Well, there was this van, this white like communications van with this guy who was like staring at me, and I just thought it was the weirdest thing, but I didn't connect the dots. And I walked, this trail is a big trail, and there's multiple parking lots around it. By the time I got to the other parking lot, the van had moved, and he was in the next parking lot, and then he was in the next parking lot after that. And when I got back to my car had been gone through. By the time I got back to my car, my whole body was breaking out in hives. And I'm convinced that he had something pointed at me in that van that was giving me hives. And I even use a diagram in my book that shows what they're capable of with voice-to-skull technology. It doesn't just like give you auditory signals, right? It can literally give you a rash. It says it in its own description. They can literally give somebody a rash if they wanted to, or hives or whatever it is. So
why do you think you do that? Is it a message?
Yeah, is what a message. Yeah, it's a message. That's why it was like they were making it so apparent that they were following me, like they wanted me to know, right? And but yeah, they were definitely trying to like give me a message, but to what end, I don't know.
Yeah, we've got some people in chat that are having some similar things happen to them. It seems that people who are interested, investigators, UFO abductees, SSP, all of that, just the gamut of weirdness happens to them.
Right.
And
Yeah.
are you finding that with everybody as well?
Yeah, not everybody, but certain people, absolutely. The ones that are, I would say, the ones that are doing the work and really trying to remember and tap in, and like, if you have things happening to you, a lot of times people are still like working a 40-hour job, and they're still kind of wrapped up in the matrix, so they aren't necessarily, they aren't really understanding the full capacity of what's happening to them. But the people in this line of work, like what we're doing, have devoted their life to it. Those people, absolutely, I would say that's common with them for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems that nearly every investigator I know, they get it. They decide, okay, I'm gonna get into this more. Maybe they retire, maybe they have some extra time, and they're going to get into it. And I always warn them what is going to happen.
Right.
You're going to be followed by cars. You're going to have your phones tapped. Everything, you're going to they're going to be pretty overt about it at times.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, whenever at one point my phone was tapped, I started dating this girl, and the whole relationship was monitored. And I found out after the fact that we were both kind of steered into each other's life. And it's a whole crazy targeting story, but that's in the book. And we would literally hear the clicks and the beeps on the phone, but somebody would actually be screenshotting our conversation. You could see the screenshot happen, and the picture would disappear.
Oh,
that was the freakiest thing. And
oh my God.
And whenever and there's things that don't make any sense, which tells me that, okay, we're dealing with something next level. Whenever they took my dog's collar the first time, didn't know where it went, so I bought her a new collar. Mind you, I've had her for 10 years, and her collar's never come off. It's just magically missing. So I bought another collar, and the next morning I'm waking up, and there she is, like, licking me and everything like she does, and I'm just like petting her with my eyes closed. I'm like, where's her collar? Her new collar was gone already. I looked all over the and I couldn't find it. I'm like, no shit. Like, where's this collar? I finally walked into a bedroom that had been closed all night. The door had been closed all night, and the collar was sitting directly in the middle of the bed, like they wanted me to know. And that's when I started researching about the CIA has these walking through walls training systems, and there's patents for it. And they literally tell you how they can walk through walls if you match the frequency of the wall and you get into a meditative state. And I would only imagine that they've developed and perfected a technology that allows them to just pass through walls. And so, I mean, I don't understand to what end all this was happening, but it was happening, and I was living it. And it sounds like a movie, but yeah, it was pretty wild. You're muted, Margie. You're muted or something.
Yeah. It does sound like a movie. I'm trying to do three things at once here. And we've got a lot of activity in the chat too.
I'm just reading the comment. Mark said, Lily, what chapter did the info punch you in the throat? So Lily Nova, the parts of my book that she's read, she was like, damn, she's like, you don't hold back. She's like, every sentence is like a punch to the throat in a good way. Like, it's just like, I don't like ease people into the information. I'm just like, this is the way it is, So
yeah.
That's funny.
We've got Fred Zoo said he was hit with vertigo after talking about the SSP. With a witness. Yeah. And then the witness was told by MIBs to stop talking about his paranormal experiences, ET experiences. I have not heard of too many people who have actually been visited by MIBs as of late. Have you?
As of late? No. But I wonder sometimes when I encounter certain people, I feel like there's something different. You could just tell when somebody doesn't belong. And they might not be like Men in Black, the stereotypical Men in Black, but they could be an extraterrestrial or from an agency. Sometimes I wonder, maybe they maybe they aren't so overt with it anymore. Because why would they keep showing up the same way? We're on to them,
Yeah, there are so many things that we cannot explain, and it's just hard to believe that our government technology is at least 50 years ahead of us. I mean, with everything we've got going on now that we know about and AI technology, what is AI doing, 50 years in the future, that technology that our government is utilizing right now? It's just crazy to think about. In my
opinion, quantum computing, timeline viewing technology, time technology. I mean, and you saw, I imagine you saw the statement the White House put out 2 days ago about time travel. Did you see that? I mean, basically they said they have the ability to manipulate time and space and annihilate distance, so they're telling you right there that their technology allows them to manipulate time and space. And they just kind of slip it in under the radar. But to me, like, that's all the evidence I need. Like, come on the White House's website. And some people are trying to write it off. One guy was like, oh, come on, you don't believe that. He said, they're talking about Zoom calls. Some guy told me, he's like, they're talking about instant communication, like a Zoom call. I'm like, no, that's not what they're talking about.
No, please wake up.
Yeah.
And the thing is too, once you go down the rabbit hole, you can't stop because there's always something new that you find, as you go. And I'm sure your book really is a journey down the rabbit hole. Yeah. For you, when did all this start? Was it at the time of your mother's death, or did you have experiences when you were a child?
I found out later that absolutely I was being taken as a child and visited, but none of that memory came back until post-awakening, right? When you start digging in and figuring out, well, wait, when did this start? And then you start revisiting points in your childhood and like, well, wait, what happened there? So, but none of it actually consciously came to fruition I didn't really know anything was happening until my mother passed. That's when it was happening in real time for me. And I always wondered why the attacks started like right then. Why did she die and then get attacked? And why not before that? And through a couple different like channeling and psychic sessions, some information came through that really kind of caught me off guard, but it made sense. And somebody was like, matter of fact, they said they were after her soul. They were trying to use you as bait to lure her in to trap her soul, as during the transition phase. And but they said that she didn't take the bait, but that's what the attack started as. But then it snowballed after that and turned into something much larger whenever I started waking up and remembering, and it was ultimately, I think it was teaching me. It was like boot camp or training, because I learned all about this stuff that I didn't even believe in before, and I was forced to believe in it because it was happening to me. And so it was like, it was really the darkness that allowed me to see the light. Like, I had to experience that darkness to even believe, because I came from a background, I didn't even believe in God or anything. I was just so like cut off, and I started getting attacked, and I was like, well, if the darkness exists, then there has to be an opposing force, and on surrendering to that and bringing that into my life is what helped me overcome everything. Recognizing the light within myself.
Before we go, before we end here, I want to make sure that we cover your conference coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is our 4th annual conference in Grafton, Illinois. You've been there the last 2 years. You spoke the last 2 years. You're going to be there this year, but as a vendor only, and from my understanding. But it's a blast. It's about 200 people every year, and we're at Pure Marquette Lodge in Grafton, Illinois, and it's just a disclosure conference. We have bonfires every night, sky watches. We go to Cahokia Mounds the very last day of the trip, and we do some activations and grid work over there. And we have all of our favorite speakers that we've had on the show. We just bring them to the conference and let them speak on stage, and very laid back. We have amazing buffet meals, and it's just a great place for the soul family to get together. And it's nice to hug all your friends that you're only, talking to through Zoom calls all year. And it's nice to just be around those people and hear some of the people that you like listening to, and actually hear them in person and meet them and shake their hand and whatever the case is. It's just a lot of fun. So tickets are still available if anybody wants to come. JourneyToTruth.online. If you saw on that flyer, just go to our website, and you can grab a 1-day pass or a 4-day pass or a virtual pass if you can't make it in person. Yeah,
and the speakers are always excellent. Fantastic to listen to. And then at the end, you do a speaker panel. I'm assuming you're going to do that again.
Yep.
And people can ask questions.
Yep. People can ask questions to the panel, and it's just a great discussion. And all the speakers are very strategically chosen to create a theme for the event. And sometimes it might seem like it's all over the place, but it all dovetails together because everything's connected. And then, a lot of people, somebody just put in the chat, the Sasquatch are waiting. Everyone has Bigfoot Sasquatch experiences there, including yourself. And I believe it was you that said that they told you that we're the only event that they actually come out for at the Pure Marquette anyway.
Yes, I made contact 2 years ago with the Sasquatch clan. Big surprise. Big surprise. They actually banged on my cabin and made me wake up at 4:00 in the morning. So it was quite an experience. But the fun thing is we got a small group both years outside, and several of us were able to see the Sasquatch appear. Several of them, I think maybe 6 or 7 of them appeared, and they were in between dimensions, so they were transparent, but you could clearly see their outlines. It was just fabulous. And they did say that your group is the only one they do that with.
That's amazing to me. I think it's just because everybody believes, and it takes believing for them to even allow their frequency in, right? So,
well, and everybody attending is very high frequency. I was somewhat taken aback the first year I attended because of this very positive energy, but by not only the speakers but all of the attendees.
Right.
It was just a very positive environment, and the vibration just went up exponentially. And I will say this, not even my conferences do that, Tyler. So
your conference, your conferences are like it's a paranormal investigation the whole time.
no,
Yeah.
no more of that. We're not. We
Right.
nixed that. We're not doing any more of that. And we're doing ours online. So, but
Right.
it's fun to be in person and to see people
Yeah.
and to meet people year after year. I think you've got a wonderful place there.
Yeah.
Are you planning on continuing that in the future or different locations?
Next year, 2026 is in Hawaii. Actually, we're going to Hawaii in April. Actually, the pre-sale is getting ready to start April 20th through the 24th. It's 5 days in Hawaii, and we're going to be swimming with dolphins. We're going to go to some sacred sites, some waterfalls, and it's going to be it's going to be like a conference/retreat. Get people moving, kind of get out of the classroom style conferences. The information's great, but I think people want to go and move their bodies and see things and stuff, and including myself. And we've done 4 years in Grafton, and it's a beautiful place. But the excitement, even for me, is dwindling, doing the same thing over and over. So I want to expand and do bigger and better things. And Hawaii is the next location. So it's going to be much smaller because it's a smaller venue. It's just a smaller retreat. So it seems counterintuitive that we're making it smaller instead of bigger, but I feel like it's more intimate, and that's where the magic happens. So
that's true. That's true. There is something to be said for that.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, we're about out of time. Is there anything that you want to say to leave our listeners with?
I would have really appreciated if everyone, who loves my book, and if they read it and they like it, to go leave a review on Amazon. It really helps tremendously in the algorithm. I'm finding out, that makes a big difference. So if you enjoy the book, please go and leave a review. And if you haven't purchased it yet, you can do so at Amazon. Just search the book. It should pop up, and Margie might go to our website. It's on the website. So, I technically started writing this in 2018, and I just finished it a couple of weeks ago. So I'm proud of it, and my heart and soul is in this thing, and it's a very vulnerable story. It's dark at times, but believe me, it ends on a high note, and it's a good story. It's a good book.
I cannot wait to read it myself. I have 300 some pages. That's 369 pages to be exact. Right. It's a little daunting, but I'm a speed reader, so I will get it done.
Yeah, I'm not pressuring anyone to read it, only if you feel called to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the show tonight, Tyler. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. I'll see you soon. 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah, it's right around the corner. Geez, don't remind me. I gotta get ready.
It sure is. Yeah. Yep. I know you've got a lot to do to get ready for it.
Yeah.
All right. See you soon.
All right. See you later.
Bye. Bye-bye. Tyler Kiwala. He's always very interesting. He's got a lot going on. I'm sure the book is fantastic. I can't wait to read it. And I know he's done a lot of research on that. So it's going to be wonderful. And of course, the conference, he said the conference, there's still some tickets available. I highly recommend that conference. I'm telling you folks, you will not believe the energy there. It's very, very high energy. And if you want to just get a boost, you want to get some positive energy, that's the place to go. And if you want to find out about hidden truths, by people who are experts in their field, it's a really good conference. I highly recommend it. All right. I'm going to have to close it out for this evening, and we'll see you again next week.